All right, guys, welcome to Beyond the Muscle. I'm excited to welcome our next guest, Dan Sutcliffe. So, Dan is back on the podcast. We first chatted way back on, I believe it was episode 5, and we basically summarized his 2024, how he got into bodybuilding, and a brief insight into training and his mindset. So today I wanted to delve into the topic of leg training with Dan. So, Dan has some of the best legs of any natural bodybuilder in the country, in my opinion. And we're going to chat everything leg training in this one. And it's going to be a fun one. So, yeah, how are things going down on your end?
Yeah, great. Yeah, really good. Thank you very much for having me on again. It was a real pleasure, the first one. And yeah, thank you for the kind words.
Hmm.
Yeah, looking forward to sort of getting stuck into some more kind of, yeah, leg specific training, lower body training.
Yeah, no, I thought this could be a fun topic, this one. Yeah, just briefly, how's your off season going down? Are you making some good progress with all of your training?
Yeah, it's going really well. It's probably the best, most productive sort of start to an off season I've had. So
Mm.
training's very progressive. Really enjoying training at the moment, and that is the main thing for me. If you're enjoying your training, I think it's not easy, but it's makes the whole process easier for
Yeah.
sure. And yeah, when you start to sort of notice improvements in performance, in strength, it makes the whole process a whole lot more enjoyable. And yeah, it's going really well at the moment. So touch woods. So we're sort of maybe 6 months until the end of this kind of off-season phase, this kind of improvement phase, and then we're looking to sort of start prep maybe early next year if all things go well. So yeah, just making the most of it really, and just trying to make it as productive as possible.
Yeah, that's good to hear. And that enjoyment aspect you touched on, I think that's so important. I think it's so tempting to chase optimal when it comes to bodybuilding training, especially with like all the information you're bombarded with online that people can overlook that enjoyment factor. And that's it's so important, I think.
Sure.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. So yeah, we chatted briefly about your leg training in the last episode, and yeah, I'd like to go into a bit more detail this time and like, kind of approach it from a few different angles. First off, like mindset when it comes to training legs. So I'm a believer that you need to kind of almost have like an extra level available when it comes to leg training, when it comes to like, intensity.
Mhm.
So intensity, let's say it's like a 10 for upper body, it has to be like an 11 for legs, in my opinion. So head down, no distractions, kind of. And I will often get like some anxiety before training legs, not the isolation stuff, but more the heavy compound stuff. How do you approach leg training from a mindset perspective, Dan?
Yeah, I 100% agree. Firstly, I 100% agree with that. With that you have to be able to tap into like another level. It is totally different to training any other muscle group, in my opinion. You have to sort of really want to go there to that point, to that next level, unlock that kind of that mindset of I'm going to suffer, and
Mm.
that sounds extreme, um, but that's how it feels when you are sort of pushing your lower body training to the limit, and that's kind of the level that I think you need to take it to be able to make sort of serious improvements in your lower body. It's obviously it's more fatiguing, it's more systemically taxing, it's harder, it's more painful, it's more
Mm.
stress on the body, there's more stress on the muscles, and it's not like training your arms or your upper body in that respect. And I think you have to sort of really tap into that mindset of approaching every single leg session with aggression and intent, and sort of really sort of throw everything at those sessions in order to be
Mm.
able to improve and progress and to sort of really take it to that next level in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I'd agree with that, definitely. And there's definitely like a difference between even I think doing like a heavy back work, heavy chest work. There's definitely a difference. I mean, that stuff's hard, but yeah, you're right. It's not quite as systemically fatiguing, it seems. I think deadlifts. I mean, I don't do conventional deadlifts anymore, but I'd often do them on my upper body day
Mhm.
when I did do them, and that was that was analogous to doing like a squat pattern movement. That you had to have the same kind of mindset for like a heavy deadlift.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, apart from that, yeah, it's just different, isn't it? Leg training is just, yeah, it's just different. I think that, and that's maybe why a lot of people just don't have the best legs because you need to go to that extra level,
Yeah.
don't you?
Yeah. You can't. It's not a sort of a session you can half-ass or sort of go in with the mindset of I'm tired, I
Mm,
can't be bothered today, I'm not feeling it. You're setting yourself up to fail if you
mm,
do that. You have to sort of get your mind right before you go in,
mm.
and be sort of really willing to sort of work for it.
Yeah,
And yeah, like you said, deadlifts, it's the same sort of thing, isn't it?
yeah,
If you're doing deadlifts on a back day, like a posterior day, it's the same sort of thing. You have to go into those kind of exercises, those kind of sessions with your mind has to be 100% in it. You can't be
yeah.
sort of distracted by other things going on, or you know,
Mm,
like you say, headphones on, world
mm,
off,
yeah.
get your mind right first,
Mm,
because as cliche as it sounds, if your mind's not right, then your body's just not gonna it's not gonna play ball. So you have to get your head in the game first, focused, and yeah, be willing to work for it.
mm.
And yeah, it's a totally different sort of approach, I suppose, to training.
Yeah, totally agree there. Yeah, it's funny actually. I was meant to train legs today, fittingly on this leg chat, but yeah, I annoyingly tweaked my knee at the weekend
Oh no.
playing with the kids. Yeah, just on this kind of bouncy trampoline thing at the Coston Farm near us, and I thought, I'm not going to leave an extra day's rest because I thought I can't
Yeah.
risk, completely messing up my knees for leg training. So. Yeah, yeah, it just speaks to that mindset
Okay.
thing. I thought, yeah,
Yeah. I
if
mean,
I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it properly. But
exactly. Yeah.
how are you? Have you stayed mostly injury free over the years, Dan, with regards to like your lower body?
Yeah, touch wood. I have touch wood. I haven't had any major injuries to this point. Uh, it's a good question. I think I have been. I've had niggles. Don't get me wrong. I've had niggles, which have and setbacks um, during my sort of training career, I suppose. I suppose over time, it's learning to sort of work around these kind of niggles, because there's always something,
Yeah, yeah.
especially you've been training sort of 15, 20 years, and not as young as I once was when I first started
Mhm.
training. You feel like you're kind of invincible when you're sort of like in your late teens, early 20s, don't you, in your training? But you don't really sort of pick up niggles like that. But whenever I've felt a niggle or something that's not quite right, I've always found a way to work around it.
Mm,
Um, so you know, if for example I have felt like I've got maybe a bit of a lower back issue,
yeah.
or complaints, or a bit of discomfort, a little bit of pain, I've rather than sort of push through it, I've
Mm,
sort of taken a step back, and sort of tried to analyze what's going on here. Why
mm,
is that? Is it too much volume, too much weight? Was my form correct? Is my execution as good as it could be? And sort of really sort of try to analyze whether or not there's anything I can be doing better to sort of
mm,
work around that issue, mitigate that issue,
yeah.
change the exercise, exercise variations, and really not be sort of married to one particular exercise
Mm,
if it isn't, for whatever reason, if it isn't sort of working at that specific time. There
mm,
have been times where, for example, I've run conventional deadlifts in my program for a long period of time, and I've tweaked my back.
yeah.
Not horrendous injuries, but there's been like a muscle strain or something like that in my sort of lower back. Um, and yeah, as frustrating as it is at the time, your body's telling you something needs to change here. You can't just
Yeah.
continue to hammer away. So I've switched that exercise out for like a like for like variation, a like for like alternative, like a Romanian deadlift, or
Hmm.
a dumbbell alternative,
Yeah.
stiff leg deadlift, that kind of thing. Try to keep the exercise as similar as possible to what I was previously doing,
Mm,
but find an alternative. So you're still getting that stimulus.
Hmm.
But you're not further aggravating that injury. And
Yeah.
touch wood, it's kind of worked well for me.
Yeah.
I think to start off with the sort of the basic fundamentals need to be applied, and that is adequate range of movement on any exercise that you're doing, so that you're actually targeting the muscles that you're trying to target.
Yeah.
And it's not just causing joint pain, joint discomfort. Full range of movement squats, full range of movement leg press, full range of movement leg extension, leg curls. No matter what exercise it is, your form and execution has to be 100%, there before you start loading up the weight.
Yeah.
And that has to be number one thing. So range of movement, execution, and just generally sort of like listening to sort of feedback that your body's giving you.
Mm.
And if there is anything that doesn't seem right, doesn't feel great, then sort of working out what is going on, analysing that feedback, and sort of just working around it really. And over the years, I've got better at doing that.
Yeah.
Maybe in my younger years, I was just like, it's fine, whatever. It's just a little pain. I'll just push through it, and you tend to get away with it when you're younger, but not so much now. And I kind of have to be a lot more aware of it these days when I'm, pushing the amount of weight that I am, like compared to, in relative terms, it's a lot more than what I was lifting sort of 5, 10, 15 years ago. So you have to be a lot more, you have to manage your recovery a lot better and listen to that kind of feedback to what your body's telling you, because there's always something, isn't there? There's always some kind of like sort of little niggle that we're working around, or some kind of complaint or discomfort, and you've got to sort of, rather than just keep hammering away at the same thing, banging your head against the wall, you've got to think, right, what can I do to mitigate that kind of that discomfort or pain?
Yeah, that's a really solid advice there. You mentioned that you've often had to like swap an exercise for another, like a like for like movement. Can you recall any times when training lower body you've had to just have time off training because of an actual injury at all?
Not so. Luckily enough, I haven't had any time off training a specific muscle group or specific area. Or let's take lower body as an example. I haven't ever had to take any prolonged period of time off of training an area, so like lower body. I have always found a way around it, and so that might be as simple as, let's take the lower back as an example. I've had a lower back sort of injury. Let's call it a lower back sort of strain, muscle strain.
Yeah.
I've still managed to train, and that might mean taking your loading out of your lower body training completely. So no lower back sort of loaded exercises. So that might mean for a period of time not doing any squats, not doing any hinge movements or any deadlifts. That might even mean you can't do any leg press. That might mean you can't do any lunges or any split squat variation, but you can still do leg extensions. You can still do leg curls. You can still do calves. You can still do adductors. There's always, unless you've literally got a serious injury whereby your lower body is unable to function, then 9 times out of 10 there's a way around it. I've taken a week off of training before when I've had an injury, and it's sort of, it's my body's maybe time to like, or sort of sign to say take some time off of training. And I've taken like an extended deload, so maybe like a 7-day deload, and that just means that obviously I'm not training for that 7 days, and things have improved in that 7 days, and I've managed to sort of go back into sort of regular training. So I suppose I have been, fortunate up to this point, that I haven't had to take any extended period of time off of training, but I've always found a way to sort of work around any issues or injuries that I've had over the years.
Yeah, that's a really important take home, I think. So I think it's tempting for, especially as bodybuilders, I think the way we're kind of wired generally to when we have like a little niggle like that, we we can kind of blow it up in our head, and it can
Catastrophize it.
yeah, catastrophizing it can seem a
Yeah,
lot worse than it really
yeah,
is. And you think, oh, you know what, sod this, I'm just not going to train for a week. I'm going to
yeah,
not train legs for a few weeks, and then yeah, and then all of a sudden you're a month down the line and things have gone terribly downhill. So, and I've been there before when I was way less experienced. Whereas now, yeah, I've got the same mindset. I kind of adapt. But yeah, I think it comes with experience, doesn't it? Being able to adapt and not let things spiral out of control. I'm
yeah.
curious as well, Dan. Do you look forward to leg training more than upper body?
I'm weird. Like I absolutely
Yeah.
love it. I absolutely love it. And going back to sort of, your sort of first question about, mindset.
Mm,
I really think that is a massive factor in how I've managed to sort of develop my legs over the years. I never used to have this kind of mindset towards leg training specifically. It was really just a tick box, check box
mm,
exercise where, it's classic. Oh, it's leg day today. It's
mm.
going to be hard. Um, can't be bothered. I'm low on energy today, or whatever. Nowadays, I really look forward to it. I really look forward to it, and I'm thinking about it the day before. It's something I really sort of I'm excited to do.
What
And
was it that changed? What was it that switched that mentality?
it's a good question. It's a good. I tell you what, I think probably what it was actually seeing development and seeing like actually physically seeing the changes in my leg development
Mm,
when I actually started training them properly, and I started to apply myself better towards my training in general, but my lower body training specifically, and I think the development itself and seeing
mm,
those visible changes, I could see from you know from the difference from when I wasn't really taking it seriously to actually like really applying myself properly and being consistent with it and seeing those changes. I was like, oh, okay, wow, okay, it does work. Like,
mm,
if you apply yourself properly and you are sort of consistent with it, you will see changes. You will see changes in a pretty relatively short space of time, provided you are doing everything in your power to sort of to grow a muscle group. And that's the same with any muscle group, but especially with lower body training, you can see when your quads have improved, can't you?
yeah.
It's the big muscle group. It's quite obvious when you start to lift more weights with the same amount of reps and
Mm,
the same form, the same execution. You're putting more weight on the bar. You're progressively overloading, and your physique is responding in
mm,
the same way. And it's that sort of correlation of progressive overload and improving performance is correlated with an improvement in your physique or improvement in your leg development. You're
mm.
like, okay, now like, this is good, this is working.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think ever since then, I'm just sort of like, my mindset is like, yeah, I'm because I'm applying myself properly now, I
Yeah.
can actually physically see like tangible evidence that it is, improving the areas that I'm sort of like trying to build up. And although I've kind of my leg development has been very good over the last sort of, I'd say, 5 years.
Mm.
They were never that good before that. It's
Right.
only because I've actually started to apply myself properly in the last, maybe since I started to compete in 2018.
Yeah.
I've actually seen them sort of improve dramatically.
Yeah. And now you enjoy training more, which is a really important message, I
Exactly.
think.
Yeah, I think the two go hand in hand. I really do. I think, um, you know, yeah, it's like what came first, the chicken or the egg. But you have to you have to enjoy your training to be able to
Mm.
see progress, but at the same time, you almost have to see a little bit of progress before you actually start enjoying it as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
The two obviously do work hand in hand, but yeah, it's definitely a mindset shift
Yeah.
over the years.
Yeah. That's an interesting one there. Yeah. Um, on our last chat, we briefly touched on like the topic of genetics. Yeah, there's no doubt, obviously, it's an important piece of the puzzle when it comes to leg training. I say when it comes to my own like legs, my own quads, they're a strong point in my physique. I don't have like four best balls trophies like you do. I've only got one, but yeah, I want to get. I think I can get some more.
Yeah,
Obviously,
definitely.
if you don't show up, but yeah, I feel some of that on my own physique is like due to limb length. I'm quite short-limbed in my lower body, so in my head at least, they don't need to because they're short. They don't need to be as big to look impressive. I could be completely wrong there.
No,
With your own like obviously leg development, they're obviously a strong point for yourself. You mentioned that you were a hyper responder when it came to weight training when you first started, but did your legs tend to grow quicker than other body parts, or was it just everything all at once?
well, interestingly enough, when I first started training, I didn't really train my legs. So
Right.
I actually they weren't hyper responsive because I didn't train them properly.
Yeah.
And so it'd be interesting to see, well, obviously go back 15 years,
Mm.
interesting to see if I actually trained them properly, like I was my upper body, whether they would have responded. I think the answer to your question is probably yes, they would have done,
Yeah.
because obviously, like you say, genetics obviously play a big role in well any sort of muscle development. But yeah, I was I'd say a hyper responder to training in general when I first started training when I was sort of like 18, 19 years old, but I was really only training my upper body properly. Legs were
Yeah.
an afterthought. I was the classic like it's leg day is today, but I'm going to train arms today.
Right, right, yeah.
Now I'm the total opposite.
Mm.
So interestingly enough, when I first started training, maybe say 15 years ago, they weren't hyper responsive because I wasn't training them properly. But when I actually started training them properly and sort of applying myself as I should have been from the start, maybe 6, 7 years ago,
Mm.
that's when they started sort of like responding really well.
Yeah. Okay, so it's hard to say, but yeah,
Yeah,
they potentially would have grown more.
I imagine they would have done
Mm.
just because, like you say, genetics, and because everything else was responding well anyway. There's no reason why they wouldn't have done. Had I sort of applied the same level of effort and
Mm.
consistency and application to them as I should have done in the first place.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I was training upper body. If I was training 6 times a week, and I was probably training upper body 5 out of those 6 days.
Yeah, yeah.
Classic bro split. And then when it
Yeah.
came to leg day, I was finding an excuse not to do it, or not do it, not to train legs properly, or I'd sort of do a bit
Yeah.
of legs and then tag arms onto the end of it.
Leaving
Yeah,
like 10 reps in reserve, all that kind of
yeah,
thing. Yeah.
exactly, yeah. And it was like squats. What are those?
Yeah, yeah.
It was, yeah, it wasn't good. But yeah, I mean, I've obviously since then they have developed well,
Yeah.
since actually applying myself, and I
Yeah.
suppose that's a good lesson, isn't it, for anyone? It's never too late. I
Yeah.
actually
Yeah.
started training my legs properly maybe 7, 8 years into my training career,
Mm.
and they've still responded very well.
Yeah,
So
yeah. That's a good point in there. Yeah. I mean, undoubtedly your quads are probably your strongest body part. I don't know that for sure, but they're definitely up there, right?
no, I'd agree. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and the thing is, my I'd say up until recently, my hamstrings were a weaker muscle group in
Mm.
comparison to my quads. And so I then started applying more volume, frequency, intensity to my hamstring training to
Mm.
bring them up, and they've responded well. So,
Mm.
it just goes to show, like, obviously, genetics, of course, play a big part in it.
Hmm.
But you actually have to, fulfill that kind of genetic potential
Yeah.
and actually train those muscle groups with enough frequency, volume, intensity, great execution.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, putting the work in. That's clear. That's clear to see. And you're doing some pretty ridiculous weights on the RDLs at the moment as well. How it might be too early to tell, but can you see that translating into some new muscle tissue as well?
I hope so. I hope so. I must admit, I did IDLs yesterday. I trained them yesterday, and yes, that was a like a 1 rep PB, and you know they are an exercise which they work really well for me, and
Mm,
this is kind of where experience kind of comes in now to sort of picking exercises which suit you, and there is a little bit of trial and error
mm,
that is involved in this. Like I said to you previously, I was trying to I was trying to sort of build up my conventional deadlifts, and each time I did, I was running into problems. Whether that was a little niggle or just didn't feel right. It just didn't feel as I wasn't getting the same kind of stimulus, same kind of
Yeah, yeah.
connection, same kind of mind to muscle kind of connection as I do with an RDL. And I've had RDLs in my program for as long as I can remember, and they
Mm-hmm.
are still progressing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, it's one of those things that will start to suffer when you're dieting, when you're on prep, when you're
Mm-hmm.
starting to lose body weight, and the numbers will start to, maybe sort of regress over time. But I've always felt that even during the sort of like the latter stages of prep, I've been able to I've been able to get a really good stimulus out of them. And as a, for a posterior chain builder, they have been the most kind of beneficial and I suppose loyal exercise to me over the last sort of few years.
Yeah.
And it is just literally just a case of rinse and repeat,
Mm-hmm.
not sort of, they have in terms of performance over the last few weeks, they have stalled a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to sort of deload, reset, sort of bring the weight back down, sort of make sure that I'm still getting that same stimulus, still getting
Yeah.
that same mind to muscle connection as I was previously, still getting that same execution, and then just building it back up again. And like I say, over the last sort of maybe 3 or 4 weeks, it's been very stagnant, very sort of slow moving,
Yeah.
and just getting that extra rep yesterday
Mm-hmm.
was, that's a big win. That's a big
Yeah.
win. They're still progressing, and so I suppose that's a good example of just being stubborn sometimes with a
Mm-hmm.
movement. If it feels good and it feels you're still getting a good stimulus from it, and it's
Mm-hmm.
still an exercise which works well for you. It feels good, but it's starting to plateau and it's
Mm-hmm.
starting to get a little bit stagnant. Stick with it, and as long as you're doing everything you can from like a recovery perspective, it will eventually sort of start to progress again. Provided you are sort of you're patient with it, and you're doing everything you can from recovery perspective as well.
Yes. Yeah. Solid advice there. Yeah, I'd be curious to hear this too, Dan. So I'd like to touch on your training frequency. So you mentioned in the last podcast that we did that you were only hitting legs, always only hitting quads once per week. This is actually of interest to me because I'm trying to actually go from a 5 day split to a 4 day split with a bit more intensity on my own training. Close proximity to failure, and yeah, a bit less volume. And I'm curious to see how that will pan out for me. But did you notice like a drop in growth, like from swapping your quad volume from twice to once a week at all?
No, not at all. In fact,
No.
probably the opposite.
Okay.
But what I will say, the caveat to that is that when I was training them twice per week, I was certainly not training them with the same intensity as what I do now.
Okay. Right.
So definitely further away from failure. So definitely less intensity, potentially more volume in terms of like working sets across the week when I was doing 2 sessions a week.
Yeah.
But now I'd say my quality of of leg training
Mhm.
is definitely much better than it was sort of when I was training them twice per week.
When did you make that switch? Out of curiosity.
Um, when did I make that switch? Probably 5 to 6 years ago now,
Oh,
I would
okay. Oh,
say.
so a fairly long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say somewhere between um, maybe my 2018 and 2021 season.
Mm.
So for my first bodybuilding season in 2018, I was training twice per week then.
Yeah.
I then switched to more of a bro split
Mm.
after that, and that's when I started training them once per week. But what I was doing was then I was then applying more volume to other areas,
Yeah.
and so it wasn't like a traditional bro split. I was, for example, on my back days, which I sort of now call a sort of a posterior day, I was
Yeah.
I was doing RDLs or a hip hinge on
Yeah.
my back day. So I was still hitting hamstrings, glutes, erectors, on my back day, even if it was just 2 sets of deadlifts or 2 sets of RDLs.
Mm.
So I wasn't training. I was only training quads once per week,
Yeah.
but I was hitting hamstrings, glutes, lower back twice per week.
Got it.
And that was because I realised that my quads were a strong point, and I needed
Yeah.
to apply that effort and apply that volume
Mm.
to other muscle groups and prioritise other muscle groups. But what I will say is that if I was trying to, let's say I was, you know, giving someone some advice now as how to bring your legs up,
Yeah.
I definitely wouldn't be training them once per week. I
No.
would definitely be training them at least twice per week,
Mm.
um, because they are, they will, like any muscle group, they will respond well to more frequency,
Mm.
provided you are recovering and you're not sort of overdoing that volume in those 2 or 3 sessions that you're doing.
Yeah.
So I would say the the main sort of gains were made in the early years when I was training them twice
Yeah.
per week. Now that they are a strong point and a more developed muscle group, I can afford to only train them once per week.
Yeah, so yeah, you were saying you still approach, even though you're only doing legs once a week, you approach legs with the same level of intensity basically, and that I think that's the key thing there, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a higher level of intensity,
Yeah.
definitely. The proximity to failure, more intent, and um, but you can still apply that if you were trying to grow your lower body. If your lower body was a weakness, if you wanted to bring up your legs, for example, you could still train legs, you know, twice per week, for example, like I was doing previously.
Mm.
With that same intent, you just have to sort of manage your recovery and manage your volume a little bit differently. At the
Mm.
moment, I can sort of go into my sessions with, knowing I've only got one leg session per week,
Hmm.
leave like nothing on the table and just go absolutely balls to the wall and leave nothing left, knowing that I've got sort of like a week to recover, really.
Mm.
Um, but obviously, if you were to train your legs twice per week and you were sort of training your legs, say, every 3 to 4 days, you would have to sort of be very mindful of that recovery period, making sure that you are actually recovered enough
Yeah.
in time for your next leg session. So that's where kind of volume would need to be managed a little
Yeah.
bit better, and just be sort of more mindful of, yeah, making sure that you are actually sort of recovering from session to session.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. Yeah, because I find whenever I do a hip hinge movement, it could be I could have DOMs for three to 4 days, despite being relatively like experienced in those movements. They just always get me, and yeah, they take a long time to recover.
Yeah.
Yeah, going back to that, intensity. I've seen how hard you train legs, and people should go and see like, you failing on certain movements because it's a true testament to obviously the work you put in. When it comes to proximity to failure, upper body, I tend to take everything pretty much to failure and beyond in some cases where it's applicable. With legs, I think it's a little bit different. On an RDL, I can get like a grinder rep out and then rack the bar because I know that the risk reward may not be worth going for another one. For like a pendulum or hack squat, I can utilize some rest pauses. What's your proximity to failure like on legs generally, broadly speaking?
Broadly speaking, if it's safe to do so, I will go to absolute mechanical failure, like muscular failure. And you hit the nail on the head there. When it comes to things like an RDL, a free weight exercise, maybe a barbell back squat as an example, if it's not safe to go to absolute failure,
Hmm.
then I won't.
Yeah.
So, you know, I will maybe leave 1 or 2 reps in the tank because, like
Hmm.
you say, sometimes that risk to reward just isn't worth it. And
Mm.
uh, you know, failure is going to look different depending on what the exercise is. So
Mm.
if you are going to absolute like muscular failure or mechanical failure where your form breaks down
Mm.
on a an RDL or like a deadlift or like a barbell back squat, you're going to fold in half. It's
Hmm.
going to, one, potentially cause injury, and two, that last rep was you would have been better off saving yourself
Yeah.
and being able to apply, that kind of that intensity and that kind of proximity to failure to an exercise which is it's safer to do so. It's safer to go to that point, that absolute point of muscular failure. And if you're taking like a hack squat as an example, pendulum squat, leg press, leg extension, those are all safe exercises to take to absolute failure and
Mm.
potentially beyond as well.
Yeah.
Um, it's safe to fail, and some of the maybe some of the exercises that you've seen me do I've failed,
Yeah.
I've known that it's safe to do that.
Yeah.
I'm sort of going into the set knowing that if all else fails, quite literally, if I fail, nothing bad's gonna happen here.
Mm.
Whereas with a barbell back squat, if you haven't got a spotter or with
Hmm.
a deadlift and you're going for that grinder rep,
Hmm.
and you fail, one, you're potentially gonna injure yourself. Your execution isn't going to be quite the same as at the start of your set or in
Yeah.
the earlier on in the set. And two, you're not getting the best stimulus out of that last rep. You're not able to, out of the target musculature
Yeah. Yeah.
because other things are taken over.
Mm.
You're having to, whereas before, taking an RDL as an example,
Mm.
you were feeling it in your hamstrings, your glutes,
Hmm.
you're able to brace properly, your abs were engaged, your lats were engaged. In that last rep that you're taking to absolute failure, I can almost
Mm.
guarantee that none of that is the case.
Yeah.
And so you know, most of the time I'll maybe leave a rep in the tank there.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
Might look at the set and go, he probably could have got another one, and that's probably true.
Mm.
True, but at what cost?
Yeah.
And so
Exactly.
kind of working out, like you say, weighing that sort of risk to rewards kind of ratio up, and working out and sort of like almost sort of being present and mindful during the set and working out like what is where to stop the set and where to sort of like leave it there, live to fight
Yeah.
another day,
Yeah.
try and get another rep next time.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Going back to, let's say you're doing a pendulum squat or a hack squat or one of those big, squat pattern quad movements. Do you tend to favor doing less sets closer proximity to failure? Because in my mind, at least, do it. Let's say you've got 3 or 4 sets of a big movement. You're going to be leaving a lot in the tank. You're going to be on set one thinking, "I've got another set of this. I've got another set." Do you tend to do like a top set and a back off, or 2 heavy sets as opposed to doing 3 sets and more for that reason?
Now I do, yes.
Yeah.
Now I do, yes. I never used to do that.
Hmm.
Definitely in the last few years, I've tended to favor that approach.
Mm.
I feel like I can get more out of the exercise.
Yeah.
And I feel like I can absolutely take it there, to,
Mm.
closer proximity to failure, like you say, not leave anything in the tank and then move on. That exercise is done, move on to the next exercise. Whereas if I was to do, say, take a hack squat as an example, you're not doing 3 to 4 sets on a hack squat to absolute failure,
No,
like
no.
10 RPE,
Mm.
0 reps in reserve. Like it's just, well, unless you're some kind of genetic freak, that's
Mhm.
not happening. Or
Yeah.
if you do, you're not then going to have a productive session.
No, after that, yeah.
If you're then going to go and do some leg pressing or some leg extension or some lunges after doing 3 to 4 sets of hack squats, um, at absolute, like going to absolute failure with nothing left in the tank,
Yeah.
it's not happening. It's not
No.
happening. Um, so yeah, these days I tend to favor a top set and a back off set
Hmm.
on most compound exercises. So
Mm.
taking legs as an example. I would tend to favor a top set and a back off set on a hack squat. Same on a leg press.
Hmm.
Same on an RDL or
Yeah.
a hinge.
Yeah.
Same on a split squat. They are very, like, basically the exercises which are very systemically fatiguing.
Right.
I personally find that I cannot recover if I do any more than two sets of most, those big exercises, those
Yeah.
big compound exercises. Things like leg extensions and leg curls and calf raises and adductors as
Mm,
well. You can recover quicker from those.
yeah.
It's less systemically fatiguing,
Mm,
less taxing on the central nervous system. You can recover from them. You can go again. You can sort of build up volume that way by doing more sets. I still take them to failure
yeah.
when it's safe to do so, but I tend to do less sort of overall sets for the compound exercises because when I do a top set and a back off set on something like a hack squat, for example,
Mm,
I'm done. Like, I'm not then going to be able to, I'm not going to then be able to complete another
mm,
productive set after that. And so it just becomes junk volume. It just
yeah.
becomes, you're just doing it for the sake of it because, so and so said to do three sets of
Mm,
10 to 12. Uh,
yeah. Yeah.
that's what I used to do.
Yeah.
Uh,
When did you make that change out of curiosity, Dan?
so when I sort of started to think about uh, how close am I taking these sets to failure?
Yeah.
Like looking back on it now, thinking back to sort of maybe 5, 6 years ago when I used
Mm,
to do legs, for example, I wasn't taking sets to complete failure.
mm,
I was able to do 3, 4 sets of an exercise of a back squat, of a leg press, of a lunge, of a split squat, of a deadlift, because I was leaving maybe 3, 4, 5 reps in reserve.
yeah.
And if you want to train like that, that's that's okay, but
Mm,
you're going to end up accruing a lot of sets and accumulating a
mm,
lot of volume um, through set volume
mm,
because you know something there has to be that kind of uh, accumulation of volume somehow, and that
yeah.
means you're not going to take your sets to absolute failure or
No.
close to it. Then that will mean then maybe doing more sets of the compound exercises that we're talking about.
Mm,
But it's just not the way I like to train.
no.
I don't find it anywhere near as enjoyable.
No, I'm the same. Yeah. I actually don't think, I think it's actually mentally harder as well, just because of the sheer amount of volume you have to accrue. It's a bit too intimidating where you know that if, yeah, you've got to really go all out with these sets of, two, or these, two sets rather, but you know that there's not like a ton of volume to do. It's easier to manage, I find, in a way. Even though it's harder, it's
Yeah,
somehow easier.
yeah, no,
Um,
I agree.
yeah, yeah, I'll be honest. I'll hold my hands up and say that, yeah, I probably spent a lot of my time just not training hard enough. I look at some of my sets, even from last year during prep, and I think I could have pushed things more there. I went a bit too deep into the whole kind of full ROM, leaving reps in reserve, RP style of training, and I think my physique suffered as a result. And I think, yeah, there should hopefully be a big difference going forward. Now I'm training harder, but yeah, I think, yeah, beyond a bit of tendonitis, I've never had that bad of an injury that, yeah, I feel I should have, yeah, potentially trained harder. But yeah, I'm kind of righting that wrong now. Do you think there is a case of people just not training hard enough at all, Dan, generally in bodybuilding?
100%.
Yeah,
100%. Especially with leg training.
yeah, yeah.
I think because it hurts and
Mm,
because it is more taxing, it's more fatiguing, bigger muscle groups, it's more painful. Yeah, I really do. I think uh, people. I don't want to. I don't want to make it sound like a blanket statement, but I think a lot. I think many people, and me included, in my earlier
mm,
years, um, will leave sort of too much in the tank and sort of almost go through the motions
mm,
and sort of it's like I said earlier, it's more of a checkbox. Okay,
mm,
I got that done today. I got it out of the way. That's legs done for the week.
mm.
Now onto arms sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's you have to sort of almost embrace that pain
Yeah.
and sort of learn to sort of lean into it and yeah, enjoy it. And as sort of
Mm.
mental as that may sound to some people, um, that is what is going to that is what's going to sort of see your physique and specifically your lower body blow up because it will respond well to uh, intensity and
Yeah.
proximity, like going as close to sort of that failure point as possible.
Mm.
Um, yeah, like I said, provided it is safe to do so,
Yeah.
and yeah, I think there's definitely a lot to be said for sort of like, not holding back, and
Mm.
I think that sort of comes with experience. I think that does definitely come with like sort of training age, so to speak, is sort of knowing what your limits are
Yeah.
and knowing how far you can take sets and take exercises. And it's definitely a skill. It's definitely a skill that I've learned over the years.
Mm.
I'm definitely more skilled at it now than I
Yeah.
was sort of 5, 10 years ago, even 2 years ago. And you have to sort of like really like learn to sort of like lean into it and embrace it.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to sort of really level up your training.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Yeah, you've actually made some amazing points throughout this. But do you think there are any other important factors that someone needs to consider if they want just freaky legs in bodybuilding?
So, so I would say the main thing, especially for sort of younger trainers, younger competitors, younger athletes, people who are sort of looking to get into sort of bodybuilding or to even just to bring up their legs and they are sort of new to training, is don't spend too much time dieting. Like spend time in a calorie surplus and actually give your body the fuel to facilitate performance,
Mm.
facilitate training performance. There is, well, it's no secret, is it? When you have more energy availability and you have more calories, more carbohydrates to actually fuel training performance, everything is going to be not just your lower body, but just in general everything is going to respond better than if you were dieting or
Yeah.
constantly sort of pulling back or mini cutting or
Mm.
thinking, oh, I feel a little bit fluffy, a little bit soft.
Yeah.
I'm going to do a bit of a diet break. I'm sorry, a mini cut or a bit of a mini diet. That time is wasted time. That is
Yeah.
time which you could be um, applying to gaining new muscle tissue.
Mm.
Unless you're new to training, um, or like a hyper responder or some kind of genetic freak, you're not going to be building any sort of significant muscle tissue whilst you're dieting.
Yeah.
And so commit to a gaining phase, commit to an improvement phase where you are in a slight calorie surplus over a prolonged period of time and progressively improve your performance over a long period of time.
Yeah.
It will it will pay off, but you have to be consistent, for months and years, and it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to
Mm.
happen in, a period of weeks. Um, and so you have to sort of like really play the long game and
Mm.
sort of commit to that process and almost like take um pride in like that sort of like that process and that sort of that delayed gratification that you're going to see in years to come through the hard training that you're doing in a prolonged calorie surplus.
Mm.
That doesn't mean to say you need to get sort of like fat and fluffy and out of shape. That just means like making sure that you are fueling your sessions and you're
Yeah.
training adequately to actually gain significant muscle tissue.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an amazing piece of advice. I imagine there are so many bodybuilders in their like 30s and 40s that they would, if they had a chance, would just say to their younger selves, just, stop dieting, just be in a calorie surplus. I certainly would because, they're the important times, those growth periods. And especially when the testosterone levels are that much higher as well, you need to really maximize it. So it makes perfect sense. So Q&A next. We'll try and get through as many. We've got quite a few, but obviously I'm aware of your time. I've also got to pick the kids up soon, which seems to be an ongoing theme of me having to pick the kids up before. But at least they're not going to interrupt us like they did last time we did one of these.
That's all good.
First question. So yeah, a few of these people we're aware of. Bodybuilding is like a such a tight-knit community where everyone kind of knows everyone.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, Ollie Rumble, who we both a mutual friend of
Oh,
ours, he
yeah, I
said,
know.
how would you rate a pendulum squat compared to a back or a hack squat for growth?
Pendulum squat compared to a hack squat or back squat. So I would, I do love a pendulum squat. They are very, very humbling. Obviously, the angle is different to that of a hack squat and a back squat. So you are able to get maximal knee flexion from a pendulum squat, arguably much more than a back squat, certainly, and
Mm,
potentially a hack squat as well. So for optimal sort of quad growth and knee flexion, I'd say they are a very, very good option for sure.
mm,
The pendulum, I would say, would suit people with longer legs, longer femurs, better than say a back squat.
mm,
Unless you've got very, very good ankle mobility
yeah,
and or short femurs. Um, a back squat wouldn't necessarily, like a high bar back squat isn't necessarily going to suit someone who's, very tall or
yeah,
has long limbs, long levers, long femurs. So a pendulum squat might be a very good alternative to that, a very good variation of, say, a back squat. And likewise with a hack squat, sometimes hack squat doesn't necessarily suit uh,
mm,
someone's mechanics or someone's lever lengths, and so although you're not going to be able to necessarily load as much weight on a pendulum squat because of the angle and because of the amount of knee flexion and depth that you have to get, range of movement that it sort of forces you into, you're not going to have to load as much weight. But in terms of like quad stimulus, yeah, a really good option, a really good variation.
yeah,
And it might be, if you're lucky enough to have access to a hack squat and a pendulum squat, it might be that you're running a hack squat for a period of time, a number of weeks and months. They start
mm,
to stagnate, they start to plateau. So you switch out your hack squat for a pendulum squat, which is a like for like alternative,
mm.
a very good variation. And yeah, you'll start to sort of familiarize yourself with that kind of new movement pattern, and you're going to start to see an improvement in stimulus and growth from there. So yeah, I'd say it's definitely a good option.
Yeah, yeah. I love both, to be fair. Yeah, we've got both. And I do both actually. I don't back squat anymore, but I do one pendulum and one hack for my leg days. Both great movements. Chris Edwards, who we'll both be aware of as well, he said, what is Dan's opinion on the good old conventional barbell back squat? You don't do those anymore, do you?
I don't, but in the early days, that was pretty much all I did
Yeah,
in
yeah.
terms of
Same.
a squat pattern. That was all I did. That's pretty much all I had access to in the early days, because I was training in a commercial gym that I worked in, and other than a really poor Smith machine, I only really had access to a barbell for squat patterns.
Hmm.
Uh, for a long period of time, there wasn't even a decent leg press. So I used to absolutely rinse back squats. And I actually think that I think I was doing back squats once per week, and I was doing front squats once per week, uh,
Mm.
like 3 to 4 days apart.
Yeah.
And I reckon I think I noticed quite a lot of my sort of leg development was through sort of back squatting early in sort of earlier on in my training career.
Do you do
Uh,
high bar or low bar squatting?
High bar,
Yeah,
high
yeah,
bar.
yeah.
And I think that's a really good point, actually. If you are able to do high bar squats, they are going to be, in my opinion, more effective for quad growth, which is
Yeah.
obviously the sort of main reason for doing a squat pattern. If you can high bar squat and you've got the mechanics to do so, and you have the ankle flexibility, the hip mobility to do so, and maintain like a relatively upright torso, and sort of really put that load through your legs with, of course, good range of movement, and good execution, and you're actually stretching those quads in that sort of deep squat position as much as you possibly can, then they
Mm.
can be a really good movement pattern.
Yeah, yeah.
It's only in recent years that I've had access to other squat patterns and other squat variations that I've moved to, a machine-based squat pattern. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with them whatsoever. And I actually do
Mm.
think that they were a massive reason why I sort of built, a lot of sort of leg muscle in my early years of training legs properly.
Yeah, yeah. Great answer. Yeah, we're just kind of spoiled for choice these days, aren't we? Because of how much access to
Yeah,
machines. Next question, Joshua Conde, my old coach from last year. You'll know
yeah.
Josh as well.
Oh, yeah.
Good question, actually. He said, with a new client, are there key things that he wants them to first learn about leg training?
Good question. Yes, I so unless this client has any sort of pre-existing injuries or anything that they're any sort of structural mechanical reason why they can't perform an exercise, I will take a new client through the sort of the basic fundamental movement patterns with just literally just body weight to start off with to make sure that they can actually perform those exercises with good execution before then adding any load or sort of progressing the exercise from a um, from a either from a weight perspective or from making the exercise sort of like harder, so to speak, more challenging. So
Mm,
I will literally get the client to sort of do a body weight squat and
yeah,
I'll assess the movement and work on any sort of imperfections, I suppose, in the movement pattern before progressing that movement,
yeah.
before then sort of progressing to say like a dumbbell, like a goblet squat, like a dumbbell front squat. Once they've perfected that and they are sort of strong enough and more capable enough to perform that, with adequate range of movement and good execution, I then might sort of progress onto like a barbell or maybe a machine-based sort of squat. That's taken a squat as an example. I
Mm,
also think hinging is really important. So teaching someone how to perform a hinge pattern, so like a Romanian deadlift without any weight to start off with, just to make sure that they are able to, they can cue what a hinge should feel like and a
mm,
hinge should sort of look like without any weight. So that they are actually feeling the stretch in the hamstrings, the glutes, they're able to brace properly. Then I will add sort of some dumbbells, so some light dumbbells and some light load before then maybe progressing on to like a barbell variation or like maybe like a hex bar deadlift or like a barbell deadlift or something like that. Once
mm,
they have sort of mastered the movement pattern itself.
yeah, yeah.
Same goes for like a lunge or a split squat. It's amazing the amount of clients that I take on who aren't able to perform like a body weight squat or like
Mm,
a body weight lunge or like a split squat. And a lot of it is just to do with is to do with the fact that they don't have that kind of like the sort of the movement pattern, sort of that conditioning,
yeah.
that conditioning of what it should feel like, getting that really sort of deep squat position,
Mm,
that sort of that able to that ankle flexibility, the hip flexibility, and just being able to sort of like absolutely nail the movement pattern first before
mm.
actually progressing it and not rushing that process and just being really patient with it.
Yeah, yeah, great point. That's true. As a fellow PT as well, you see there's such a spectrum, isn't there, of how quickly people just latch on to certain or how quickly people get things. Some
Yeah.
people just with no experience can just squat to depth or
Yeah.
do a full press up, and it's other
Mhm.
people take a bit more time to learn the movement. I think yeah. Josh also asks, tongue in cheek. I think this one is only one set of split squats per month based on the amount of weight you do. Yeah,
It's getting to that point.
yeah, yeah.
It's getting to that point. I was, yeah. So funny enough, during prep, so towards the end of the dieting phase, I was doing not as much weight, not as much weight. So I was doing 2 or 3 sets to sort of
Hmm.
make sure that I was, because the weight was lower and I wasn't as strong,
Yeah.
and I had less body weight and less body fat and less, I suppose, less recovery capacity, I suppose. I was doing less weight and more sets, and I don't actually know whether I preferred that
Right.
method because I'm now only doing 1 set,
Yeah.
but the weight is, yeah, obviously significantly heavier, and yeah, they are horrible. They are
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
are.
For those who don't know, yeah, Dan was, yeah, he does 60 kilos in each hand for his, not RDLs, his Bulgarian split squats, which is, yeah, ludicrous, ludicrous weight.
But funny enough, at the end of prep, I was only doing 40 each side
Yeah.
for the same amount of reps. But to get that same kind of intensity, that same kind of volume, and I was doing 2 sets of that.
Yeah.
So it got to the point where there's absolutely no way I'm doing 2 sets of
No,
that.
no, no.
1 set is plenty, is
Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah.
plenty. And I'm absolutely gassed at the end of it.
Mm,
It's like done. Move on, yeah, move on to the next exercise. So yeah,
yeah. Yeah.
once per month I'd say is absolutely plenty.
Yeah. 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 No, yeah, that's it. Curious, do you take a break in between doing one side and the other? Do you take like a minute or so?
I do, I
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
Um, I try not to. Like I tell myself before the set I'm not going to. And
Right.
then I
You
do. I
need
do
to.
one. I do one side, and I'm like, I'm taking a rest. Like,
Yeah.
I'm taking a rest.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. In all seriousness, if you're not able to then complete the next, do the other leg, do the other side as well as the first side, then it's counterproductive.
Mm,
Uh, you could argue that you're sort of keeping the intensity high, but if your heart rate is absolutely through the roof and you're still pre-fatigued from doing that other
the first
side,
one. Yeah.
you're not going to get, the idea is really to match how many reps you do on one side to the other side. So if you're if
Mm,
you're, not, if you're doing 10 on one side, let's say, and you're only able to get 4 on the second side because you're absolutely gassed, then it's pointless. So yeah,
yeah.
I do take a rest. I try and limit it, but it's getting tough.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah, we'll move on to some of your questions next. So from Mr. Coach DSL himself, he said, tell the story about when you first switched your legs on correctly.
Yeah, so this is a funny one. In my first competitive season, I was sort of put in touch with Darren. I sort of met him after my first competition, actually, at the BNBF Southern, and we sort of kept in touch. And I realised that he was a posing coach, and my posing needed work, so I left it too long, really. But sort of, I think maybe 2 weeks before the British finals, I met up with Darren for a one-to-one posing session.
Mm,
He sort of said, "How's it going?" And I said, "Yeah, it's great, but my legs are nowhere near lean enough. Nowhere near lean enough." And he sort of like frowned and he sort of said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, I can't. I'm not seeing like lines or sort of striations in my legs. I'm seeing them everywhere else.
yeah.
I can see them in my arms and my chest and my abs and glutes and everything's in apart from my quads."
Yeah.
And literally the one cue that he said, which was to tense from your hip flexor and not actually tense the quad itself, i.e., like just above the knee, which is what I was doing, before he told me.
Yeah.
My legs just like totally changed. Like
Mhm.
the look just totally changed. And it was like a real like eureka moment. It was like,
Mm,
oh my God, they were there the whole time. I just didn't
hmm.
actually know how to pose them. I just didn't
Hmm.
actually know how to contract my sort of quad muscles to
Hmm.
actually show that kind of separation. And I went from thinking that, I wasn't lean enough, and that I didn't have like muscle separation or quad separation to like literally in that sort of like that moment realizing that um, realizing that I was doing it wrong the whole time. And
Yeah.
I guess it just goes to show the importance of if you don't know what you're doing with regards to posing, hiring a posing coach and actually getting them to sort of teach you how to do it properly from the get-go, really.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's so true. Yeah, that right there, it just goes to show how important posing is. And yeah, it's an area that people should not overlook when they're getting into bodybuilding. So important.
such a simple, like that was such a simple
Yeah.
thing, but it completely changed the look of my legs.
Mm,
Um, and yeah, just that feeling of like, from where you're supposed to be, tensing from a different part of the leg, the different part of the quad, and it just completely, yeah, transformed my legs. But
mm.
it was all there. I just didn't know how to show it off.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah. It's funny. I had something similar last year, and Josh said, just push your hips back a bit. And for me,
Mm.
that was the light bulb moment. That was the cue that really got all of my leg detail to really pop.
Yeah,
And, yeah, it sounds like a similar thing. Yeah.
yeah. Sounds so simple,
Mm.
but it makes a massive, massive difference.
Yeah, yeah, it really can. Because I was like, I'm leaner than a lot of these people. Why are they seeing sartorius muscles and I can't see mine? It's like this doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just the simple things, isn't it? Um, Brad Dodd asks a good question. So, how do you develop the outer quad sweep? And yeah, be curious to hear your thoughts actually on this one.
Yes, it's an interesting one. So in terms of ice, you can't actually isolate
Yeah.
the quad sweep. You can't actually isolate the vastus lateralis. It's, you're going to be you're going to be you're going to be activating the other quad muscles regardless of what you do, whether you're squatting, whether you're leg pressing, leg extension, split
Right.
squats.
Yeah.
Um, you're you're not going to be able to just isolate that one particular area. Now, there might be, and I say might be because I don't think there's much research on this. I think there's maybe a couple of studies that I've sort of found where if you sort of slightly change your foot positioning or the let's take a leg extension as an example. If you slightly turn your feet in, you might be able to sort of bias the vastus lateralis, the quad sweep, a
Mm,
little bit more than the other muscle groups. But personally, I don't overthink it. I don't
mm,
overthink, I would like to bring up my quad sweep. I think I've got a good vastus medialis, so
mhm.
the sort of teardrop,
Yeah,
the inner
yeah.
part of my quad. But my sweep, so to speak, the outer part of my quad is weaker. So I'd like to bring that up, but
Mm,
that doesn't mean to say that I don't change anything that I do with regards to quad training to try and bring up that specific part of my quad.
mm,
Um, I know that some people, and these people are, big names in the bodybuilding game, and they have huge legs.
mhm.
They will say that maybe if you bring your feet slightly narrower on, say, a leg press or a squat pattern, that's going to bias a little bit more outer quads compared to if you were to have your feet wider, that might sort of bias a little bit more kind of like adductor,
Yeah.
for example. But I would say to most people, it's just a case of getting bigger quads, and it's
Mm,
a case of working on the overall leg development and overall quad development, and making sure that you are getting full range of movement on your squats, full range of movement on your leg presses, your leg extensions, your split squats, lunges, etc. That is what is going to build the quads. And if you've got weaker quads or you want to bring up that particular area, that muscle group, just training them hard with adequate range of movement and good execution, your whole leg, your whole quad is gonna
yeah.
get bigger. It's going to improve. Um, it's going to develop. So although there might be, and this is kind of this is more sort of like anecdotal, I think, because I don't think there's much sort of evidence to suggest this is the case. Although there might be some sort of like tweaks and some sort of like changes you can make to your kind of the way you do a certain exercise, i.e. foot positioning. I don't think it's necessary personally to sort of focus too much on that.
Yeah, yeah,
Focus on just developing your quads as a whole. Uh,
yeah.
and maybe when you get to that really sort of advanced stage where you think, actually, I've got some really good quads now, but I'd like to bias my vastus lateralis a little bit more, my quad sweep. That's when maybe you need to start thinking about maybe sort of like changing, just tweaking a few things with regards
Mm,
to foot position and uh, small little amendments, small little adjustments that you can make to maybe bias the outer part of your quad, maybe compared to say like your adductor or
Yeah.
the medialis, for example.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'd agree with that. Yeah, because I wasn't aware of any data that said you could target specific parts of the quad. The only one that I was aware of, I think if you lean back on a leg extension, I think you could hit the rec fem a bit more. And I think leg extensions already hit the rec fem more than other quad
Yeah, sure.
movements.
Yeah, for
I think
sure.
they're largely absent in like squats, for example, potentially.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, and I think a lot of it is just genetic as well. I had Charlie Cuthbert on recently, and he's got really, really strong like quad sweeps. I think it's good. It's largely genetic, isn't it? That how obviously I think posing is another one. Obviously, the more we angle our feet out, that can really bring out the sweep as well.
Yeah, I can agree more. The
Mm,
obviously everyone's origins and insertions are sort of different. Muscle bellies are different. Obviously,
mm,
so with that in mind, there's a big genetic component
yeah,
involved. For sure. And like you say, yeah, you can sort of pose in a different way to kind of bring out that sort of like quad sweep.
yeah, yeah.
Uh, but yeah, I do think there's definitely a genetic component to it. Some people have like lovely sweeping quads, don't they?
Mm,
And I expect if you ask them, they're not probably not doing anything different.
no, no.
Bring up their quad sweep,
Mm,
and they're probably not doing anything different to you and I or anybody else to sort of bring
yeah,
up that sweep. It's probably more so that they were blessed with
mm,
that, a good sort of good muscle bellies.
mm.
And yeah, I think there's definitely a genetic component to it.
Yeah, yeah. That's the thing. Yeah, I think all our legs will look slightly different when they're kind of, let's say, fully developed or mostly developed, and it's just a case of stimulating the muscle enough to get to that point, isn't it? Really?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
There are a few more questions, but I'm afraid we're gonna have to call it because it's kid pickup time for me. But yeah, Dan, this has been amazing. I've really, really enjoyed this chat, and you've given us some, as I knew you were, some amazing take-home points. So yeah, we've already done our quick fire stuff. We did that last time, but
Cool.
yeah, this has been amazing. So yeah, thanks again, Dan, for joining me. Really love this.
No, it's been great. Thank you very much for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, it's been awesome. Yeah, so thanks for watching and for listening, guys, and we'll see you next time.